Purity amidst madness. Chapter 5. To call our assault on the chosen gate of Saint Miran Temple a fight is an insult to battles everywhere. Two surprised mediators took a look at us and began wildly firing their guns, while a pair of geomancers rushed to engage us, supported by a summoner and a priest. Mestadio began counter-sniping with his gun, and within 3 shots his targets were down. Orlando and Ramza both cut down the geomancers almost without breaking stride. I personally took down the priest by filling his robes with destructive magic and exploding the cloth all around him, and Agrias impaled the summoner with a lightning blade before they could even finish their first spell. And with that, we were within the halls. Even there, resistance was minimal. Orlando's skill with his sword, and the speed with which he wielded it, was such that whenever we encountered a foe ahead of us in the hallways, he had already drawn and clubbed them unconscious with the flat of his heavy blade. My role in the whole matter was simply to guide us towards the chambers of High Priest Funeral. It's funny to think that amidst all our preparations, including taking a roundabout route to the chambers, we'd run into the last 3 shrine knights I ever expected to see. Rofel was the one who'd trained me as a divine knight whenever my father couldn't be bothered, and he'd been at the job for years when I was born. It's an understatement to say that he was freakishly strong, and his speed was more than a match for my own. Defeating him was a task beyond me on my best day. Cletion was not much older than me, but his mastery of magic was astounding. Black magic or white, he could pick up in days what took most people weeks or months to learn, if learning such was even within their capability. I had once seen him cast a shell spell strong enough to block most of a Bahamut, which he'd followed up by using a protect to take a dragoon's leap without flinching. And everybody within the church knew that his offensive magic was more powerful than his defensive magic. Dominating my attention, however, was my father. Though he was a divine knight like myself and Rofel, he'd somehow learned to push enough power into his abilities that they could affect even those without equipment or armor. To say that he's the strongest divine knight in history is no lie. The instant his eyes found me, his lip curled into an awful sneer and his eyes grew even colder than ever. "Daughter," my father's voice sounded amused as his gaze drifted to Orlando, who'd already leveled his magnificent blade in the direction of the 3 shrine knights in front of us. "I'd heard that you failed to kill Ramza. I hadn't heard that you'd joined the whelp, however." "Father," I began, trembling. Remembering the past few weeks and all the confusion, I let my anger creep into my voice, allowed it to stiffen my spine and strengthen my resolve. "Is what Ramza says true? Did you really kill Islud?" My father paused, before shaking his head. "Islud was always smarter than you, Meliadul. He was always willing to ask questions. He was even stupid enough to get in my way at Ryavanes." "My father, no," Vormav concluded. I fought the urge to sink to my knees, fought the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. "You've always disappointed me, Meliadul. You'll also die at my hand, but you were too stupid to even figure things out yourself. Die clueless, then. Be ready, girl. I can't do this on my own." Orlando hissed, prompting my hand to reach lethargically for my blade. "Orlando, Meliadul. We've got a battle group coming from behind." Ramza's voice called, and a second later he entered the hallway himself. At his entrance Vormav paused, motioning for his 2 cohorts to do the same. "Ramza, it's interesting to meet you," Vormav grinned, taking a step forward. "Forgive me, I don't have time for pleasantries, so let's get down to business. if you want your sister back alive, you'll give me the scriptures and the stones. If you don't, she dies. Hand them over, now."
Ramza froze for an instant, shooting me a quick look. I shook my head in return. I could grieve about this later. Right now, our leader needed to focus on something he could change instead of events that had already passed.
"Where's Alma? Unless you show me her now, I'll not hand over the scriptures or the stones."
Ramza snapped, punctuating his statement by drawing the samurai blade sheathed at his side. At our leader's side, Orlando readied himself to strike, his eyes tracking the enemy leader's every movement. I knew a fight was going to break out any second. I wouldn't hesitate, as I had when facing Dice Dark and his men. I wouldn't be useless, as I had been when Ramza faced Adramelk. I shoved my doubts aside and drew my own blade, readying myself to meet Rofel's eventual charge.
"Didn't you hear me? You have no choice."
Vormav spat, taking another step forward and holding out his free hand.
"I'll say it again, hand them over."
Ramza paused indecisively before reaching into his pack and grabbing an old, beaten leather book. He took a step forward and placed it on the ground, keeping his eyes on the trio facing us at all times.
"Only the scriptures. I'll give you the stone only after I see Alma,"
Ramza declared, his feet sliding out as he prepared himself for battle. Rofel moved forward to take the book, and Ramza muttered to Sid,
"They're not even trying to pretend they're going to give Alma back, are they?" Judging by the grin on Vormav's face, I'd say not. "I never liked him, anyway,"
Orlando concluded, before casting me a slight grin.
"No offense, wench. He's not my favorite person right now either, old goat,"
I replied, though I couldn't find it in myself to put any humor into the comment. I glanced to Ramza.
"What are the chances of any of our friends coming through that door to give us better odds?" "Not good,"
Ramza admitted with a slight shrug.
"A couple holy swordsmen decided to join the party with a group of mages and some squires, and agrias, and the girls needed all the help they could get. I was actually coming up to see if you two could come help us back there. So how do we like these odds? I can handle Vormav pretty easily, but he will take up most of my attention,"
Sid admitted, warily eyeing Rofel as the latter paged through the scriptures.
"Wench, who do you like better, big and surly or the pretty little waif at the back?" "Ramza probably has better odds at neutralizing Kli Tian's magic,"
I admitted, though I winced a second later.
"Of course, Rofel trained me and is far stronger than anybody has a right to be. I can keep him occupied and I doubt his powers will work on me now that I know how to prepare my equipment, so I might be able to use that to slip in a strike or two." "You're welcome for that,"
Orlando noted loftily.
"Well?"
Vormav demanded, his eyes never leaving us.
"It's here. It's a simple curse,"
Rofel said quietly, snapping the book shut and putting it in a satchel at his waist.
"Well, looks like we don't need these three any longer, then,"
Vormav concluded, his blade leveled at the trio. He shrugged, almost apologetically.
"I could let you go, but Velius and the others deserve vengeance." "Bastard!"
Ramza yelled, closing with his foe. Vormav's blade snapped down and then back up in a mighty upswing, intended to cleave the blonde Beolv in half. Rather than attempting to counter, our leader leaped over him, landing between Kli Tian and An, the man I used to call father, as his hand touched a sheathed katana at his side.
"Verse of Oblivion!"
Kli Tian cried out in horror as Ramza closed on him, the magical protect spell shielding him visibly weakening as the blonde's draw-out technique sapped his magic power. And then I was too busy to see more, Rofel closing in on me with his heavy blade. Despite gripping my own sword quite firmly, the first blow he leveled my way nearly tore it from my grasp. I spun with the blow, desperation fueling the strength in my fingers as I brought my sword around in a powerful blow which the older divine knight facing me deflected with ease. I rolled forward underneath the downward slash of his blade as I regained my balance, turning as soon as I regained my feet and putting my whole body behind the thrust as my eyes tracked Rofel's spin. Unfortunately for the bastard in Vormav's employ, he wasn't quite fast enough to dodge the strike entirely, the thrust deflecting off the back of his armor to gash his flank. A stench filled the air which took me only a moment to recognize, as my memories flitted back to the two demons who'd lain on the floor of Marquis Elmder's receiving room. The nasty grin on his face distracted me from the conversation Ramza was having with Vormav while Sid temporarily distracted Cletian.
So, you figured it out? Not that it'll help you.
Rofel admitted, stretching as his muscles temporarily bulged obscenely beneath his armor. He swung the sword he held in his hand experimentally, the blade producing an ominous sound as it rent the air in front of him.
I'm glad I can stop holding back. You were a fair student, girl, but nothing more than a distraction. I guess I should be a good teacher and remove you from this world myself.
I felt a familiar hum in the air, feeling the way his soul interacting with the magic of his blade to prepare him for the strike of a divine knight. A small part of me wondered how a demon without a soul could even use the sword arts, but I quickly filed the thought away as tossed my shield to the side, gripping the heavy knight blade with both hands and crouching low as I prepared my charge. In a straight fight, I had no chance against this monster. Even had he possessed the strength of a regular human, he would have been an opponent beyond my own talent. With his demonic strength, he was very clearly toying with me. Yet I knew that what he was preparing to do would leave him dangerously vulnerable, if only for a moment. My only hope in living beyond the next minute was to take advantage of his momentary weakness. Either I would be successful, or I would die. In the corner of my eye I could see Ramza pressuring Cletian's impressive defensive magic, leaving him unable to counter-attack. Likewise Orlando dueled with Vormav, only the magic of his enchanted sword allowing him to keep pace with the creature wearing my father's likeness. If I failed, neither of these two men would be able to help me. If I failed, Rofel would kill me. I smiled as Rofel swung his sword down, attempting a hell-cry punch. The invisible magic arced between us, and had I not been a divine knight I wouldn't have noticed the heavy, invisible magic strike the blade in my hands as I charged my foe. I did notice. The magic struck, fighting to find some purchase on my weapon as I began my swing. The magic failed, and I saw the way Rofel's eyes widened at the way his own attack had failed. Terribly fast, his blade rose up to deflect my overhead swing. A move I'd anticipated from him the moment I began my assault. I tilted my blade, turning the momentum from his attack to my advantage as I spun with the force, taking a step to the side and spinning in a horizontal slash. I misjudged his own speed, as instead of beheading him like I'd planned, the tip of my sword merely bit deeply into his neck and splashed his hellish blood all over the floor. His eyes widened in shock as his hand raced to his damaged throat, but I saw no reason to stop. He hadn't stopped moving yet. I continued my spin, my own divine energies shaking restlessly as I brought my sword down and loosed my magic towards my foe. Rofel felt what was coming even as my shell-bust stab struck him dead center in the chest. Unfortunately for him, he didn't take nearly as good care of his equipment as I did mine. The explosion threw him at Vormav's feet, twitching weakly.
We won't be stopped this close to victory. Cletian, escape!
Vormav commanded, grabbing Rofel's shoulder and teleporting them both away. An instant later, Cletian followed.
Vormav, quit running, you bastard!
Ramza roared, running through the only other door in the room. Sid and I exchanged quick glances and followed. When Sid and I caught up with Ramza, he was already crouched next to the leader of Ivalis' spiritual community, High Priest Funeral. A large sword stuck obscenely from the man's back, and I felt awe at the fact the man was even still living.
Do you know where they went?
Ramza asked quietly, reaching a hand out to rest it on the dying man's.
Orban.
Funeral gasped, his breath fading into a rattle as he finally expired. I could have revived him. For that matter, Ramza could have. Yet neither of us made a move to do so as we hurried away to go save our friends. As we ran, I did happen to glance over at Ramza.
Orban Monastery.
Ramza growled as we emerged into a large hallway. The location seemed to have some special meaning for him, and I resolved to ask about it when we made it away from St. Miran Temple. When? Not if. I grinned to myself as I burst through the entryway to the hallway where the sounds of battle already echoed frantically from the stone. Rafa was frantically casting a revive on Mestadio as we entered, and Agrias was currently wading through a group of 4 knights, her rage and pure obstinacy apparently keeping her from being overwhelmed as she fought her way to Lavian's downed form. On the other side, Alicia and Malik were all that stood between a second battle group and our friends' total annihilation. We'd arrived just in time. Ramza wasted no thoughts on anything but saving one who was about to be lost to us as soon as he realized that Agrias wouldn't make it to Lavian in time. A quick leap landed him squarely in the heart of the enemy formation, where our friend lay, and a phoenix down was dropped on her still form even as Ramza ate into our foes like a cancer. Likewise, I lent my strength to Alicia's flagging resolve, nearly cutting one of her foes in half as a protect spell spilled from my lips to shield the pair of us, and Malik as well. Orlando wasn't far behind me, a black mage in the enemy's rear ranks falling to his powerful arts. Once the 3 of us joined the battle, the tide quickly turned. Though we were battered and nearly broken, we pulled our friends from the jaws of death and fought our way free of St. Miran Temple with the same numbers with which we entered. Glancing at Ramza's relieved face as we made camp, hours later, I knew he wouldn't have forgiven himself if it had been any other way.